welcome to the third episode of the Best Games Period. I'm your host, Jack Gardner. With me are Jeremy Brown and Daniel Jones. And today we're going to be talking about Telltale Games' seminal classic, The Walking Dead Season 1. Kind of kicked off episodic gaming, sold 21 million episodes total, and it's kind of a big deal. So we're going to talk about it. How you doing, fellas?
Phew! 21 million episodes, huh?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Wow.
It's a big number.
Yeah. The Walking Dead name probably helped with that.
Yeah. But to answer your question, Jack, I'm doing okay. Daniel, how are you?
Oh, right. Yeah, you did ask a question. I'm good. I'm all right, actually.
You know, Daniel, just for that, I think that if we were a Walking Dead group, I think I'd kill you first.
Okay, well that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't even care.
Did you really need that to solidify that, Jack? Or I mean,
I don't think that was necessary at all. I would come right back and I would just eat you.
Oh.
So
that seems
I
fair.
don't even care. Yeah.
I bet I'd be pretty tasty, so I don't blame you there.
That's right.
In our previous podcast, we talked a lot about this game, like kind of sickeningly so. I think we talked about it for 6 weeks straight.
6 weeks straight. We just didn't even stop it. We hold the Guinness Book of World Records.
Well, I mean, it was no Mass Effect or Skyrim, but we did discuss it a lot, yes.
No, man. We talked about Mass Effect.
Well, I think probably what made us keep talking about it was that we were talking about it as the individual episodes were coming out. And so we'd get reinterested in the game series every few weeks and
every few months more like, but I digress.
You still kind of have a little bit of a grudge against this game, don't you, Jeremy?
Only in that regard.
Yeah, so what do you guys think of this? I mean, obviously I'm pretty sure we all like the game. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but pretty safe bet that we all like it, right?
I love it.
Okay. Daniel?
I love it as well.
Okay.
I think I will talk about my gripes with it, but yeah, I mean, for what it was, I absolutely love it. I just think it's fantastic, but it's I have issues with how it's aged. That's all I'll say.
Really?
We'll talk.
Okay.
We'll dive into that a little later.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
I actually, so kind of behind the scenes look here. I usually record the video stuff, like the gameplay that we throw up on YouTube, before we talk about the game that given week, so that, I have a little bit of hands-on experience, a little reminder of what the game was like. And I kind of went into it expecting the first episode to be kind of lackluster, I guess. I didn't remember it being particularly engaging in retrospect, but it's pretty heavy, actually. There's a lot of stuff going on in episode 1 of The Walking Dead.
There is.
Oh, that voicemail from her parents. Whew.
Oof. Well, and then the part where he has to, kill his zombified brother, and he can't tell anybody that, oh, I know that it's that guy worked here because it's my brother. Because this is something else I totally spaced on, because the main character of this series is a convicted murderer who got a lifetime sentence.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's something I don't think you really think about when you're playing it, but
as you progress, you don't think about it. I think in the beginning.
Hey!
Daniel?
Before we get too far into this, we should just put out a disclaimer.
Oh, right.
That we are going to talk spoilers.
We might have been better to put that at the forefront before we talked about the terrible things. But yeah, spoilers for everything in The Walking Dead Season 1. I think in general we're going to be spoiling a lot of things on this podcast.
Yeah, I think in this podcast, spoilers are just part of what we do. So be knowing, be aware.
Keep that in mind. Now, if you listen to our Donkey Kong Country podcast, then you would know that we talked in depth about King K. Rool and his motivations, and how at the end Donkey Kong decides to just let him live out of mercy.
Yeah, it had a lot of Lord of the Rings vibes going on.
Yeah.
Drew a lot on Tolkien.
So you'll remember from our Donkey Kong Country episode that we spoil the story of that absolute masterpiece of literature.
I mean, who could forget the scene where Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong are fighting over the golden banana in King K. Rool's mountain volcano fortress? And
it's amazing. And then Dixie just comes along and steals it from them both, and then she falls into the lava, and that's how she learns to fly.
That's such an emotional scene. I cried.
It's amazing. Yeah. So anyway, spoilers for The Walking Dead season 1.
Yes. So, why is this one of the best games, period?
Well, who said it is?
Oh, are you throwing down the gauntlet?
No, I think it's one of the best games, period.
Okay, that's much less interesting.
I know, right?
Probably, I mean, just looking at it at the time it came out, it did something that I think people were hungry for, something people were ready for, was it told a very mature story with really interesting characters, really relatable characters, while also telling it in a way that you felt like you had some control over the story. It came out in that time where that was all the rage. You know, Mass Effect, even BioShock with like the little sister decisions, Infamous, and Heavy Rain. Like the way that you chose to play the game, Fable, like games were trying to give you choices and let you decide how your story would play out. But I think until that point, no game had put such a focus on it as The Walking Dead.
Well,
season 1 did.
But
I disagree, because I think Mass Effect, and before it even Knights of the Old Republic.
I guess what I mean is like The Walking Dead. That was the main draw of The Walking Dead. Mass Effect and Knights of the Old Republic had other things going on, but The Walking Dead was focused on the story and the way that you changed the story, manipulated it.
But at the end of the day, you really didn't change it. It gave you a better illusion, I think, of choice, but really it didn't matter.
That's one of the flaws with it, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I think
let's get into this. Let's do it.
I think one of the main draws of Mass Effect is actually the decision making and the effect on the story. So I think
you're wrong, but all right.
I think The Walking Dead was riding on the coattails of people looking for more of that in games, because really, when you get down to it, like Mass Effect as a series is one of the greatest decision-based games ever. Like that series, all three of them. But so I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah, the dynamic
and The Walking Dead filled that void. And it filled it in that void in a way that no other game had up until that point.
What void? You just said Mass Effect.
Well, but it came out in 2013, and so like that's right around when Mass Effect 3 came out, right? Or am I a year ahead?
2012. They both came out in 2012.
It was 2012.
Dang.
Oh, because The Last of Us came out in 2013. That's how I remember. They did not come out in the same year. So what made The Walking Dead unique and made it interesting?
But Mass Effect, and to a lesser extent KOTOR, their emphasis was also on gameplay. And gameplay kind of diverged from story. Like, the story of Mass Effect is the decision-making stuff, the cinematic parts are kind of separated from the rest of the game. You're not playing the game from a cinematic point of view. You're playing it from third-person perspective, which is fine.
You just said exactly what I was trying to say earlier.
I think in Mass
but
Effect...
I said it better.
Apparently.
It took a while for those decisions to play out. In The Walking Dead, it felt immediate and, impactful. And it was also highly emotional when making those decisions because you got a little girl and, as you alluded to earlier, Jack, a convicted murderer that you feel really strongly about. Like, you like the guy, whether you think you should or not. Mm-hmm. Speaking of the decisions in Mass Effect, it took 3 games for them really to really come out. And the third game was largely about having those decisions come into play. Where this one, it was almost instant, and it was either gratifying or terrifying, depending on the decisions you made and how you felt. And I think that was impactful. Also, you didn't have to be a skilled shooter. You didn't have to be a skilled RPG player to be able to play the game. Mm-hmm. You could really just point and click and get through the game. I think that's why it was appealing to a lot of people. And it was also, released kind of at the height of when The Walking Dead TV series was really getting big.
Yep.
Which I think had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, that first episode even had Glenn in it.
Yeah.
From the Walking Dead.
Mm-hmm. And Herschel.
And Herschel.
Oh, yeah. And Herschel, too. Yeah.
But yeah, so there is something a little bit, and I guess why I kind of figured it might not have aged very well, is because it feels like a game that's very much rooted in its time, like in time and place in the industry. And just going back to my earlier point, Mass Effect 3 came out on March 6, 2012. So
before The Walking Dead. 'Cause that was April.
Yeah, it was coming out after Mass Effect 3 had already been out, and people were talking about the decisions in Mass Effect 3, and that was very much on people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not ours. We didn't talk about that.
Not at all. We didn't talk about it.
I mean, I'm pretty sure we just got done saying we talked way too much about Mass Effect, and here we are.
Here we are talking about The Walking Dead, and we can't help but talk about Mass Effect. All right. I'm going to make Mass Effect. I'm going to ban it from the rest of this podcast.
Well, wait before I make this next point.
Okay.
I think another reason that The Walking Dead got really popular is it kind of did away with the whole good versus evil, Paragon versus Renegade type decision making. Because all decision makings in The Walking Dead are designed to be pretty amoral. Like, the game doesn't pass much of a judgment on you as a player.
Yeah.
Except through interactions with other characters. Like, maybe you do something that Clementine doesn't agree with, and then you feel bad, but the game is not...
she will remember that.
But the game doesn't ever, like, you lose 5 evil points for being good, or you lose 10 good points for kicking that old lady. I don't know. I'm not a video game writer.
Yeah. You're totally right, though, and I remember hearing a podcast with the Telltale guys at the height during the season of The Walking Dead before it came out, before like it was finished, and they were talking about the decisions, and they said they would track those decisions. So those stats at the end where it tells you, 70% of players did this, or 50% of players did that, and 50 did the other, and blah blah blah. They said that, like, if they had any choices on there that people were overwhelmingly deciding one way over the other, they would change that. Like, they didn't want it to be that way. They wanted it to be gray, and that you could go either way, and they wanted people to feel like either choice they made was validated.
Right.
And looking at the statistics from the choices people made, they did a good job of that.
They
I
did.
mean, it's pretty
They did
evenly
well.
split.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's also the Walking Dead is really interesting to me as like from a development point of view because they were developing future episodes as previous episodes came out.
Yep.
So they were able to look at that data and change stuff later on in the series based on that feedback. And in an interview with Patrick Klepek over at Giant Bomb, I think Dan O'Connor said, writers can go back and look at episode 1 and say, oh, it'd be really cool if a character responded in this way if you had screwed them over back here. We can look back and say, well, only 2% of the people screwed them over, so even though it might be a cool thing to do, nobody's going to see it. Let's spend our energy somewhere else where people are going to see it. And so it helps focus development, I guess, and create more meaningful interactions that people are going to appreciate and understand. Like, playing through episode 1 again, I will 100% of the time save Carly when you're forced to choose between saving Carly, the sassy reporter who knows how to handle herself and is a good shot with a handgun, over Doug, the overweight tech guy, who gets almost no screen time, and really the only thing we have to go off of him is that Carly likes him and thinks he's brave. He might be brave, but he's not good with a gun. Like, I think somewhere it was like 75 to 80% of players chose to save Carly over Doug.
Oh, yeah. Contraire, mon frere. It's actually 52 Doug, 48 Carly.
What?
No, I refuse to believe that is real.
Maybe that's changed over time.
I mean, that's changed. That's with all the different releases, iOS, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
but
I call BS on that one.
I kind of do too, but I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. I remember that seeming to be a really obvious choice too. I did the same thing. But what were some of the most memorable moments for you guys during that season?
The entire season, or are we going to break it down by episode? What are we doing here?
I think we should do entire season.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can't remember specific episodes. I can't distinguish one episode from the other.
Well, speaking of
in my
Carly,
memory.
Lily shooting Carly was pretty messed up.
Yeah.
The whole duck situation, even though he was a little snot, was pretty messed up.
But he wasn't like that. That was kind of the brilliance of the duck character was that he just was like, he wasn't trying to be bad. He just ended up screwing over so many people by being a dumb kid.
Yeah, and exactly, that's it. He was a dumb kid, and he had the benefit of having two parents to see him through the beginning of the Walker apocalypse, where, and everybody compares him to Clementine, who seemed much stronger, much, more sound in her decisions, even though she was also a scared little kid, but she didn't have that. I mean, she woke up with her parents in Savannah, missing.
And her babysitter trying to kill her.
Yeah, so she kind of had a little different approach to it than him, so it's understandable.
Well, and I think they're interesting foils for each other as, like, child characters, because when I think of child characters in movies or games, I usually think of them being like Duck, being really irritating and talking
Anakin
all the
Skywalker.
time. Yeah. And what are midi-chlorians? But Clementine, I guess one of the guiding principles behind her development as a character, and this is coming from Kimberly Wallace, did a really great interview with Sean Vanneman, who is the creative lead and one of the writers on, especially had a big hand in the first episode, and generally in the series overall. But basically, the season 1 started with the idea for Clementine, and was based off of their art designer's daughter, largely. And he had a lot of insight as her father and was just basically said something really good. And I think this plays a lot into why Clementine is so beloved and not regarded as an irritating child character. He basically said, he didn't basically say, he did say, the less my kids talk, the smarter I think they are. And so you have Clementine being this much more reserved, quiet, observant child rather than being a exuberant, talking, kind of clueless child, which is Duck, right?
Yeah, sure.
Also, fun fact that I found out while kind of looking up stuff about this game, Telltale originally envisioned Clementine having an older brother who would be the main character.
Huh.
And then when they decided that that kind of a pre-existing relationship would be too much for players to accept coming into the world of The Walking Dead, they actually changed her race so that she looked more like she could have been Lee's daughter.
Huh.
So,
Really?
yeah, the game could have been a lot different.
So, Daniel, I don't want to take up all the favorite moments. What were some of yours? Or most memorable moments, I should say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because you think about all the choices and stuff, and those stand out to me, and the emotional moments like Duck dying. But, like, two moments really stand out to me as I remember that season, and it was, the first is really loud, and the second is really quiet. And the first one is the second episode and the climax of that episode when Lee discovers that they're eating the guy. I can't remember his name.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that just blew me away. I could not believe what was going on.
It's a house of cannibals.
Yeah.
Did you manage to keep Clem from...
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Me
too, and to me that was...
Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh.
I mean, to me that was hugely important that I was able to do that. And I don't even know why. I mean, I guess because I'm human and cannibalism I think is terrible. But also that concept that he came to care for her so much that he wanted her to hold on to that tiny bit of humanity, even though they were all starving.
Yeah. Oh man, I mean, that, I just remember being completely stunned by that. And I went into it not knowing what was going on. You know, I think I played that very soon after it released, so nobody had spoiled it for me. And it was just such a shocker. I couldn't believe what was happening. And then, I think it's the fourth episode where they're on the train.
Yeah.
And the first of all, the train sequence was really annoying because there was like, I could not figure out what tool I was supposed to be using.
Yeah,
what
that was
buttons
difficult.
I was supposed to be pressing. Like, but whatever. But the moment where, Lee cuts her hair and, they just like talk, and then he has that conversation with the old guy about her. That was the first time when you really felt like, oh crap, like he's like her father now. Like that's, and also like the symbolism of her cutting her hair was kind of like, now she's really grown up. She's really started to grow up.
And he teaches her to use a gun, which actually, the first time
and
I saw
the
Ellie
gun.
use a gun in The Last of Us totally reminded me of that scene.
Yep.
It just did.
Yep. But that's a really quiet moment, and I think that's one of the lasting impacts of The Walking Dead is that it was one of those games that proved that games can do quiet character moments. It doesn't always have to be ratcheted up to 11. It doesn't always have to be dimed out. To quote a good song from this year.
I would agree.
Just kind of building off that, one of my favorite I have several favorite moments from episode 5. I really
Well,
like...
it's your turn. Name them.
Yeah, go for it.
I really like that they made the bold choice to infect Lee with the zombie virus. I think that takes a lot of guts. I also think that they probably had that planned from the beginning because
it
just seems like it would have taken some foresight. But we have we have some time to kind of prepare for him to be dead because we know he's not going to get cured.
Mm-hmm.
At best, you might think that by chopping off his arm, he might get some time. But I don't know. Did you guys chop off his arm?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so did I. But then the scene at the end where, he's going to get Clementine back from this crazy guy, right? Yeah. And he has to go through that herd of zombies, and all he has is like a shard of glass.
Yeah.
And that was just so intense and just kind of in my memory forever. But then encountering the crazy guy, the stranger, that's probably one of the... I don't know, it's one of the strangest and most conflicting moments I've had in a game.
And kind of going back to the decision part, ultimately you would have confronted him anyway, but think back to the station wagon, when everybody wanted to take the food except for Clem. Yet she's the one that ended up in that, situation, being held hostage by that guy.
Right. Did you guys take
That's good stuff.
That's really...
I thought that...
never put
the
that
car looked abandoned,
connection.
So yes, I did.
I did too.
I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good for you. You're a better man.
Yep. You know why I didn't? I didn't? Because those characters never eat. They never actually do any of the surviving that they should do. Like, it never comes in. You never say, "Oh, thank God I picked up that bread back there because now I get the option to eat."
Well, there's some things with energy bars.
There is that energy bar thing.
I know what you're saying. It doesn't feel like a necessity. Really.
No, but beyond the logical part of it, it seemed like such a small thing in the moment, and then it comes back 4 episodes later to be huge.
Yeah.
I think that was great. I really do.
Yeah.
But with the stranger, it's interesting because the game confronts you with the result of your decision making, and how that has utterly destroyed this man's life, and you kind of see how, with just a slight twist of fate, Lee could have ended up as that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if he hadn't met Clementine and was just alone in the middle of a crazy zombie land, like, his backstory is pretty tragic, like, when you get down to it. He probably still would have gone to Macon, but, he would find his brother dead, his parents dead, his wife had left him, cause she had been cheating on him with a senator. Like, at that point, he's just alone in his hometown that's infested with zombies. And maybe that's all it would take to break him,
Yeah. He could have very well ended up one of the bandits that attacked them all, or one of the people from that one town that was terrible.
I think he probably just would have kind of become a lone killer like that one guy. Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
I think that's done a lot of different things. I think that's the beauty of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's always been a big theme in all of The Walking Dead. Like, straddling that line between good and not bad, but just lost. Broken.
He needed something to keep him together and to survive for, and that was Clem. I mean, right place, right time, call it whatever you want. And her too. I mean, she never would have survived without him.
Mm-hmm. Also, one of the things we haven't mentioned yet that I really love about every Telltale game, really, is that you can be silent.
Yeah.
Like, silence is such a cool option. And I love that in any dialogue that you can have, you can choose just not to have it. You can just choose to be a weird, silent goon.
Yep, you can be.
Yep.
Did any of us choose to not have Clementine kill Lee at the end?
No.
Did you let him turn into a zombie?
No.
No.
Okay. Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
I also don't think that was a difficult decision.
It wasn't a difficult decision, but it was still emotional.
Yeah, it totally was. Oh, okay, so let's dive into that. So, why do you... Okay. Some people have complained that your choices don't ultimately matter because it all comes down to the same choice for everybody at the end and the same endings. So, yes, it doesn't get the hate that the end of Mass Effect 3 got, but I think because Mass Effect was 3 games and people dedicated a lot more time to it. But why do you think it got any heat at all? Do you think it's warranted?
Well, I think it's somewhat warranted in the way that they kind of advertised it and played it off as your choices really having an effect. But, the choices, to me, had more of an effect on me personally, not really the end of the game. Some of those choices weren't easy. And how are you going to make a game where you're now selling to suddenly millions of people, where you can do that and still be completely coherent in a game that actually was fairly quickly developed, as much as I complain about it, and, released in the way that it was. Like, from Clementine's point of view, sure, killing Lee at the end, or from a player's point of view, I should say, killing Lee at the end, most of us aren't 8-year-old girls, was a no-brainer. To her, with, at that time, the hope that her parents may still be alive and all these other things, that's pretty, that's a big choice for her.
Wait,
so
she didn't see her parents?
No.
She did, but not until after that. Didn't she? Or was that before that?
No, I thought that was before that.
Did she? I thought she never saw them.
No,
but
she
maybe
did
I'm
see
just
them.
not remembering.
But I thought it was right at the end when she was going out on her own, and before that moment at the end where she saw those two people in the silhouette. Like, she walked out and... No, that was before that, because...
It was before, because Lee was with her, and he was saying, don't look.
Yeah, he dressed her all up in the zombie blood. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
he said, don't look at them.
You're right.
Yeah.
But I know there goes my theory.
But I know, your point's still valid.
Yeah.
She, it was her last... it was the last bit of innocence.
So, looking at it from that way, she knew her parents weren't there, and the only other real person that she truly cared about at that moment that she felt could take care of her, she had to make that choice. Not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
she could have cut his head off and put it in a fish tank. She had options.
That's true. How do we feel about this game mechanically?
I mean, as far as, gameplay?
Yeah, as far as, gameplay and puzzles and all that stuff. Because this is an adventure game, and it's credited as kind of revitalizing the adventure game genre. And we've already seen stuff outside of Telltale games like King's Quest, Life is Strange, taking heavy cues from what Telltale has been doing with adventure games since The Walking Dead. How do we feel about that?
So, from a true action game perspective, I think it has many flaws. I like it for what it is, but it's not something that... at times it wasn't very easy to determine exactly what it was you were supposed to do. That got better in the later episodes. I think they did a good job of making it understand. And the consequences of dying, even in the earlier episodes, weren't really any consequence other than you had to start over a sequence. It is an action game, but I really think that the story and the emotion were the highlights of that game, not necessarily the gameplay.
My question is, because whenever they're asked about this in interviews, it seems kind of like Telltale designers and writers, they kind of seem to be of the opinion that having the story flow in an efficient way is at odds with having really decent interactive stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's kind of why they have, fewer options, not really as many direct gameplay features going on.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that holds it back? Like, do you think if they had more involved puzzles, more interesting gameplay segments? Because when you get right down to it, the most action-packed that The Walking Dead gets is QuickTime events. And I know for my part, I absolutely hate QuickTime events, but for some reason I give them a pass in Telltale games.
I don't think it holds them back. I think that's part of what makes that particular game brilliant. And generally I agree with you, like, or agree with people that, want a fluid experience, a hands-on experience that just kind of flows, like maybe like Uncharted or something like that, where it has all of those things, but it's always, there's always something happening. There's always action happening. I think the way Telltale did The Walking Dead Season 1 was completely brilliant in that regard. Like, some people say it's not really a game, it's an interactive experience, which is fine, they can say that. But it's still a great experience, interactive game and or otherwise. It's something you won't forget easily. And even if it doesn't age well, I mean, if you think back to the time that you played it the first time and the experience that you had, it has to resonate with you and stick with you,
Yeah. I guess, but my question is more, is there a way that you think it could be done better? And to include those, more in-depth puzzles and more, involved action sequences rather than QuickTime events and really obvious puzzle cues.
Is there a way it could have been done better? Well, I suppose there is, but none that I can think of or speak to.
Yeah.
What about you?
I mean, I don't have a solution for the problem, but I think especially we're five series removed now from Walking Dead Season 1, right?
Yeah.
Or 4, I guess, if you don't include that, the first series. But, I need to stop saying, so much. I'm just trying to stall for time while I get my thoughts in a row. When you look at The Walking Dead and you compare it to the latest release of Telltale's Game of Thrones, I think that I'm not going to get into spoilers for Game of Thrones. I've played it, and I think it's left wanting because Telltale's formula for games that they establish around the time that they made The Walking Dead. Yeah, they made Jurassic Park before that, and Back to the Future, but for all intents and purposes, it was established in The Walking Dead.
Oh, yeah, they were a known studio, but they blew up during The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
No doubt.
But Telltale's formula works best when you have confined scenarios. When you have, like, in Tales from the Borderlands, for example, a lot of those episodes are kind of structured around a chase, or we have to get from point A to point B, or linear scenarios. And The Walking Dead similarly has something like that going on with each episode. Had a little bit more character dynamics, wasn't quite as propulsive as Tales from the Borderlands. But when you get to something like Game of Thrones, that's a much more complex, politically heavy and charged drama.
Correct.
And when you get to that point, it feels very artificially constrained to have only 3 or 4, sometimes even 2 choices in any given political moment. Like, in the show, characters lie all the time and then go back to their friends and they're like, well, I was just lying. Don't worry about it. In the game, it feels sometimes like you just lie and then you have no opportunity to go and explain yourself to the people who you might have just made your enemies. So there's kind of a give and take there, and I feel like what Telltale has found is a good balance, or at least what they found in The Walking Dead is something that is perfect for stories that are more linear, but not necessarily for stories that are the most adept at being made into games, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense, but I also think, I don't want to keep comparing Telltale to Telltale. In my opinion, The Walking Dead Season 1 was far superior to Season 2. But that's a different discussion, I suppose.
I want to get into it, because, we're talking about it now, but... yeah, I think... Okay, this is all I'll say about that, but I think that The Walking Dead did something really great that resonated with a lot of people. But I think that what Telltale does in The Walking Dead is done better in The Walking Dead Season 2, and also done better in Tales from the Borderlands.
And maybe that kind of goes back to my whole Mass Effect 1 being better than 2 and 3. It's not overall a better
crazy.
game, and I know that. But it set up, it set those games up to be better games. So
yeah,
I just appreciate the original.
But so do you? My question is,
like Jack, if you died and your clone started hosting this show, I would try my best to love him, but I don't know that it would be the same, right?
Well, okay. So does that mean when you're watching Lord of the Rings, you think Fellowship of the Ring is the best film?
No. Okay, don't argue with my logic here. It's only logical at times.
I'm taking it on head on. Which one is the best Lord of the Rings film?
Two Towers, obviously.
Well, there we go.
Clearly, the Two Towers, but we all agree on that.
Seriously, do we all agree on the Two Towers?
I think so, but it's not.
Most people go with Return of the King. I'm surprised we all agree on that.
No, that's the wrong choice.
Return of the King is great. They're all great. That's the problem. None of them are wrong. But the Two Towers is the bridge.
Unexpected Journey.
The bridge between, Fellowship and Return. So,
okay,
and it was written in the 40s, 50s. It's different.
My love of the Two Towers stems entirely from Samwise Gamgee's monologue at the end.
Yes,
but
nah, yeah, that's great. But for me, it's all about Gollum and Smeagol.
Yeah,
and
it's all about them trees, yo.
Establishing that character. The trees are fine, but Gollum, Smeagol, and Helm's Deep.
Okay.
Yes.
Which is an amazing battle scene where, Return of the King is all just one big giant battle scene, but Helm's Deep is more muted, but it feels so much more interesting and impactful because of the way they build the tension in that scene. I love it. So, I haven't finished season 2 of The Walking Dead. But also because I couldn't bring myself to care about any other character but Clementine in that season.
That's kind of the point.
I played the first 2 episodes.
Yeah, you have to make it to episode 3, 4, and 5. Because episode 5 made...
What is this? The Final Fantasy 13 of Telltale games?
No, because even if you make it to the end of Final Fantasy 13, it still sucks. Zing! Shots fired. Pop, pop.
I'd like to rebut that, but that was funny.
Honestly, one of the things that I appreciate most about The Walking Dead is that it is something that anybody can play and enjoy. And those style of games are... I love that style of game, and I love that it exists. I played Until Dawn this year, and that was one of my favorite games this year, and I played through the entire thing with my wife, and we sat down together and every night and played a couple chapters of that. And I just played, and she sat there and helped me decide what to do and where to go and what choices to make. And that was like, it was like binge watching a season of a Netflix show, but it was interactive and playing a video game. And I've had similar experiences with Telltale games where anybody can play those games and people can get into them even if they don't play video games. And I think that's a really important factor to talk about with these games, in that they appeal to a wider audience without being dumbed down.
Daniel, did you ever stay up all night playing until dawn?
I've stayed up all night playing until dawn with several different games. Not that game specifically, though.
Well, I mean, it only makes sense with that game as far as a joke. Jerk.
So my big question, kind of following up on what you just said, is The Walking Dead responsible for getting the casuals involved in gaming more and kind of making casual gaming more, I guess, more a part of mainstream gaming?
I don't know if that's really happening the way we would like it to, but I think The Walking Dead contributes to that for sure. I think any game that provides an experience for people that don't typically play video games, on that's available on platforms that people that don't typically play video games would play video games on, is good. Like, The Walking Dead being on iOS is a big deal. It might not seem like it to us since we all played it on consoles long before it came to iOS, but people will sit and play Walking Dead on their iPad who don't have any desire to own a PlayStation or an Xbox. And these are also people who don't really want to play kid games on the Wii, and they don't, Wii U, and they don't want to dedicate a lot of time and energy to, like, stupid, free to play games on the phone. But they want, maybe they're interested in something, and I think The Walking Dead gives them something to be interested in, and an entry point into video games. And at a time where video games really are still growing their audience, that's incredibly important.
Yeah, I guess more what I meant by my question, and this is probably a better way to phrase it, but...
No, my answer was perfect, Jack.
No, it was... I'm not saying it wasn't perfect. But I guess, to me, I think The Walking Dead is one of the biggest contributors to normalizing video games.
Okay, yeah. Exactly. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Like, I totally think it's a great thing, too, because I think it's a game that almost anyone can play, but it isn't Tetris.
Right.
As great as Tetris is as a game, and maybe we'll have to do an episode on Tetris, because Tetris is one of the all-time greatest games ever.
Yeah,
but
we should.
But as great as Tetris is, you don't look at Tetris, or most modern adults don't look at Tetris and go, this is a great work of art. They look at it as a children's game. Or just a game in the sense of a game and not a work of art.
I still suck at Tetris.
Or, they don't see the serious drama and storytelling potential of games in Tetris. And, that's not the fault of Tetris, but
no.
The Walking Dead is a game that's, serious dramatic storytelling, but it can reach everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it can reach everyone on Xbox 360, on their phone, on Android or iOS. And that's, I think, one of the greatest things ever, because now we also have games like Hearthstone and Monument Valley, and we even have, like, the Final Fantasy series on our phones.
Side note, I played Monument Valley this week because it was free on iOS. It's really good.
Yeah.
Turns
Final
out
Fantasy
really
is a
good
trigger
game.
word for me right now. Let's not go there. Not happy about Final Fantasy VII. Just saying.
Speaking of episodic.
Yeah, speaking of episodic.
Maybe if Telltale was doing it, I'd be more excited about it now. I don't know.
Would you though? Because can we talk about the tech behind these games?
Yes, by all means.
So, when I think about The Walking Dead Season 1, I also think about, and pretty much every Telltale game at this point, I also think about, like, long pauses between scenes where like, it'll be transitioning from, like, this dramatic action moment to another moment where maybe you're in control. So it'll go from cutscene to gameplay, and it'll give you about a 3-second screen of black where you aren't doing anything. And that happens all the time. Or just like weird animations that take you out of the experience. Just like moments where like your character almost seems to like skip along instead of actually walking like a normal person. Just weird little things that happen in those games. I don't know.
Telltale games specifically?
Yeah.
I will agree, there were many glitches in The Walking Dead, and The Wolf Among Us had quite a few as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes from just... really, they're treading new ground with episodic games. They'd done it previously, but they're kind of blazing a trail for episodic content and stuff like that. I think the only other game I can think of in recent...
Final Fantasy VII.
There's Final Fantasy VII. There's also, I think Resident Evil Revelations 2 had episodic content, and then King's Quest. And
Life is Strange.
Life is
And I don't
Strange.
recall any crazy weird glitches in that game.
Well, that game had some weird moments.
Yeah.
But I haven't
Weird
finished
moments,
it,
but...
so, yeah.
But you cut the first. I think you can cut season 1 some slack, because I know they had a lot of glitches with saves and stuff like that because they'd never done like a carrying over episodic game series before, and so you can cut them a little slack there. But when that stuff is happening 5 series on, then you have to kind of look at their technology.
Sure.
And we kind of brushed up against this earlier when I was talking about the limitations of what they've been doing in like games like, Game of Thrones, for example. In Game of Thrones, the visual limitations are just staggeringly obvious because the art style that they chose for that game is not... It doesn't play to the strengths of their engine. So, because the engine is almost built to look more comic book-y, which serves The Walking Dead and Fables and Tales from the Borderlands exceedingly well. But when it comes to Game of Thrones and trying to look like an oil painting...
Yeah, like a watercolor painting.
The aesthetic doesn't work nearly as well on that game.
It works for the character models, but it doesn't work for like the background objects because some of them are
awful.
just... There's a filter that they put over some of the objects that are kind of further away that makes them look all pixelated and like drawn by a child, and it just does not look good. But so when it comes to just like visuals and then gameplay, I think it kind of breaks down in more expansive games, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think... have either of you played Until Dawn?
No.
Oh, I got hiccups again. I'm sorry, guys.
Was that a no, Jeremy?
Yes, that was a no.
Well, I highly recommend it but I think that's also soured my opinion of Telltale games for right now, because I want, like, Until Dawn was such a smooth experience all around. The presentation was unbelievable. The character models were great, but more than that, it just transition so well from scene to scene, and your choices also had an impact like on the gameplay, and you saw like the way that it branched. Different characters would be alive, and you would have scenes that you would miss certain scenes if a certain character was dead. Just your choices seemed to have more of an impact, and because it was all in one, they could have released that episodically, but it worked better being able to just play it straight through. I finished it in a week, so it was just, I don't know, man. After playing that game, it's hard to go back, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, have you played any of the more recent Telltale games? Like
Game of Thrones.
Have you played
Yeah.
Tales from Borderlands at all?
I haven't. Tales from Borderlands is on sale right now, so I'm thinking of buying it.
I've said a few times already during this podcast, but I cannot recommend Tales from the Borderlands enough. I think
it's $3.75 on the PlayStation Store right now.
I think it's
For the first episode?
No, for the whole season.
What?
Yeah.
For PlayStation Plus. Yeah.
And for my money, Tales from the Borderlands is the best Telltale game.
That's what people say.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
I'll try it.
I'd encourage you to give that a shot before you say you're sick of Telltale games, because Telltale has so much potential with what they can do, and what they have announced that they're going to do is just crazy on the horizon, but...
Wait, they're not making Horizon.
No, you know what I meant.
That'd be a very different game.
It would be.
Robot Dinosaur will remember that.
But the point is, I think that Telltale is capable of so much more than what they're doing in both in the gameplay department, but also in their storytelling department. Because what flew from an indie studio 2 years ago doesn't fly as well, 2 years later and millions upon millions of episodes sold, because, each of their series has been wildly successful, except maybe The Wolf Among Us, not quite as much.
Yeah.
They've reaped tons of profits from this, and it's playing Game of Thrones kind of made me go, okay, I'm ready for them to kind of take this to the next level. And I'm not exactly sure how they would do that, but I do know that it would necessitate a better game engine, and being, because they've done amazing things with what they have, but I think it's time that they do more with more, because they have more now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's conflicting, because I want them to succeed. So the fact that they're making a ton of money off of, Tales from the Borderlands and Minecraft, and Game of Thrones, that's great to see that they're still having success, but I want them to utilize that funding that they're bringing in, the money they're bringing in, and do something with it to enhance what they do, because they do make great games, and I want them to make something groundbreaking again.
And it doesn't even have to be AAA.
No,
it just has to keep with the times.
Exactly. Keep with the times. Exactly.
And so I think we've gotten a little bit off topic.
Yeah, we did.
We went
way
bit off topic, actually. So I guess what my main question about Tales from The Walking Dead. We've been talking about everything else. The Walking Dead season 1. Is it enough that it is a great vehicle for a emotionally compelling story, even if the gameplay isn't necessarily as tight as something like Dark Souls, or as engaging as something like Dark Souls, or as vibrant and alive as Donkey Kong Country? Is that enough for it to be one of the best games ever? combined with, combining that with, the place it has in the industry for, revitalizing the adventure game genre and, bringing gaming more mainstream. Is that enough? Is that enough to make it one of the best games, period?
Yes.
For my money, yes, for most of those reasons. It's revolutionary. It's not the tightest game, it's not the best game, but for what it is and for what it's done and what I think Telltale will continue to do, yes.
Yeah.
It is one of the best games, period.
Definitely.
People should play it.
Yes.
Yeah.
They should.
Its place in history definitely has a lot going for it.
And it's extremely accessible. You don't have to own some obscure system to be able to play it. You can play it, almost on any platform.
Here's the thing about The Walking Dead Season 1 is I'll always remember it as one of the first games to ever make me cry. And to ever really affect me emotionally. Right up there with the Half-Life 2 Episode 2 and To the Moon.
He was my friend, and his name was Lee.
Yep. And that's an accomplishment. And, in 20 years, will I want to sit down and play The Walking Dead Season 1? Probably not, to be honest. And that's probably its weakest.
I do think it's a game
biggest weakness.
Better best remembered.
Yeah.
But that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, in that there's not.
It is a game solidly of its time, and that's not something that, is a bad thing. It did amazing things for when it came out.
Yep. For my money, The Walking Dead Season 1 is one of the best games, period.
It is a good value, speaking of for your money. I mean, it's a good game for the
Well,
cost.
I was going to ask, is it worth going back if someone hasn't played it somehow, by actively avoiding it? Is it worth going and seeking out and playing now?
No, because you just listened to this entire episode and you just heard the whole story, so you probably have no reason to go play it now.
Is it worth
Just
playing if you
teasing.
already know the story?
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes and yes.
So to clarify, you would not get the same experience out of reading the Wikipedia summary, for example.
No.
Correct. Oh, no.
Yeah. Even if you know what's
No.
going to happen, it's still going to grip you by the heart and rip it out and crush your dreams.
Well, Jesus. I don't know about that. Next week, we will be covering Ico, Team Ico's namesake, and Fumito Ueda's first masterpiece. First of, hopefully, 3 masterpieces.
Hopefully more.
Well, yeah, hopefully more. We'll be like 70 by the time the second Guardian comes out. Jack, Jeremy, thank you for joining me tonight.
You're very welcome. Also, I have always pronounced it Ico, and I probably will pronounce it Ico on the podcast.
Fine, you can be wrong. And thank you out there in podcast land for listening to episode 3 of The Best Games, period. If you like the show, let us know and share with your friends, because we are trying to build our audience. Follow us on Twitter at Best Games, period. And feel free to give us feedback on the show. We're still growing, still trying to improve the format. You can listen to it on SoundCloud. Soon it will be up on iTunes, and there will be a video version on YouTube. So every Monday we have the SoundCloud audio version and the video version on YouTube go up. So keep an eye out for that, and join us next week for a riveting discussion on Ico.
Also, you can download this show from our hosting website, Libsyn, if you want to, for whatever reason. And where can people find you guys?
I'm usually either at work or at home.
Okay. Useful knowledge for a stalker who's definitely not me.
True. Well, you can find me mostly on the Twitters at mojomonkey_12. Oh, and I have a new Steam name, Mojo Monkey V2. Mojo Monkey 12 V2.
Okay.
As in version 2.
Yeah. That's clever. And I am Indie Jones 84 on Twitter.
And I am Riverboat Jack on Twitter. So follow us if you want, for some reason, you creeper you.
Yeah, really. All right. Till next week. Peace out.